So picture this scenario for a second. It is a sweltering, like 90-degree summer day.
Right.
And you've picked up a mild stomach bug, so you're sweating, you're a bit dehydrated, maybe you've even been vomiting.
Yeah, miserable.
Totally miserable. And you've got a headache from the heat and the dehydration, so you go to the medicine cabinet and pop a couple of over-the-counter ibuprofen.
Okay.
And like every other day, you take your normal, routine prescription blood pressure medication.
Yeah.
It sounds incredibly mundane, right? Like half the people you know on a Tuesday in July.
Oh, absolutely.
But secretly, that specific combination is a ticking time bomb. It is known in medical circles as the triple whammy, and it can cause a sudden catastrophic shutdown of your body's master filters your kidneys.
It creates a perfect biological storm, honestly.
Wow.
And the terrifying part is just how rapidly this happens to an otherwise completely healthy person.
Right, because usually we think of kidney stuff as taking forever.
Exactly. We aren't talking about a disease that takes, decades of poor diet or lifestyle choices to develop. We're talking about hours to days.
Hours? That's wild.
Yeah, you can go from totally normal filtration to a life-threatening metabolic crisis in the span of a weekend.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because usually when people think of kidney disease, like you said, they picture a slow, inevitable decline. Like, a grandparent slowly needing dialysis over 10 years.
Right, well, that captures part of the landscape, but it's fundamentally a different process.
Okay.
What you're describing is chronic kidney disease,
Mm-hmm.
or CKD. In CKD, the functional tissue erodes over months or years.
So it's gradual.
Very gradual,
Oh.
which actually gives the rest of your body time to adapt to the changing chemistry.
Mm.
But our focus today on this deep dive is entirely on acute kidney injury, or AKI.
Right. AKI.
And the word acute is doing like all the heavy lifting there.
Yeah.
It is a sudden, steep drop in function where the kidneys rapidly lose their ability to filter out metabolic waste, balance your blood electrolytes, regulate your fluid volume.
All the crucial stuff.
All of it. It's not a gentle slope. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's a sheer cliff edge.
Which makes it wild that for most of the 20th century, doctors didn't even have a standardized definition for this cliff edge.
Oh, it was a mess.
From what I've gathered in the sources, they called it acute renal failure, but they diagnosed it using something called Gestalt, which is essentially just a fancy medical term for pure doctor's intuition.
Yeah, it was absolute chaos from a clinical perspective.
Just guessing.
Pretty much. I mean, a doctor would look at a patient's rising creatinine levels in their blood, notice their urine output was falling, look at how the patient was breathing, and just make subjective judgment call.
Wow.
There was no standardized number,
Yeah.
no real threshold. So one hospital's definition of renal failure was another hospital's definition of, let's just give them some water and watch.
I imagine if you were a researcher trying to figure out how to cure this condition, you're just doomed from the start.
Totally doomed.
Like, if you can't even agree on what the disease actually is or when it officially begins, how can you possibly compare a new treatment in New York to a clinical trial in London?
You couldn't.
Mm.
And for decades, the research just completely stalled.
Right.
I mean, in the 1990s, massive meta-analyses found over 30 different completely arbitrary operational definitions of acute renal failure being used in published literature.
30? That's ridiculous.
Yeah. It wasn't until 2004 that a multidisciplinary group finally published the A-Rifle-E criteria, which was the first real attempt to stage the severity based on measurable mathematical variables.
Okay.
And that eventually evolved into the current global standard, which is the 2012 KDIGO definition.
And during that evolution, there was a massive deliberate name change, right? They dropped the word failure and replaced it with injury.
Yes.
That feels like a huge psychological shift. It's like telling doctors, don't wait until the house is burned to the ground before you call the fire department. Notice the smoke.
That is the exact clinical philosophy behind the change. I love that analogy. Calling it acute kidney injury sends a really clear signal that even mild dips in function matter.
Yeah.
You don't have to be on the brink of needing a dialysis machine for it to be clinically meaningful.
Right. The damage is already happening.
Exactly. The cellular stress and the metabolic damage start way before the organ completely fails to produce urine.
But this brings us to a massive flaw in how we actually diagnose this injury in the first place. You mentioned creatinine earlier.
Mm-hmm.
For anyone unfamiliar, creatinine is a normal byproduct of your muscle metabolism that the kidneys are supposed to constantly filter out, right?
Right. It's just background noise your muscles make.
Okay, so if your kidneys shut down, creatinine builds up in your blood. But I need to push back on how useful this actually is as an early warning system.
Please do.
Because if it has to build up over time,
Yeah.
isn't relying on creatinine basically like looking at the light from a distant star?
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Like, you're not seeing the star as it is right now. You're seeing what happened a long time ago.
You're touching on one of the greatest frustrations in modern nephrology.
Really?
Absolutely. Because creatinine has a specific, steady rate of production from your muscles, it takes time to accumulate in the blood plasma.
Right.
Even if the kidney's filtration rate instantly drops to zero, like in a second, a rising creatinine today reflects kidney damage that probably started 24 to 48 hours ago.
Wow.
You are almost always diagnosing the past.
That's staggering to think about. By the time a doctor officially reads your lab chart and says you have an acute kidney injury, your kidneys have already been suffocating or poisoned for a day or two.
Yeah. What's fascinating here is that the scientific community is highly aware of this blind spot.
I would hope so.
Yeah, researchers have spent the last 2 decades hunting for real-time biomarkers. They're looking for specific stress proteins molecules with names like NGA or KIM1. The dream is to isolate a chemical that spikes the exact minute the microscopic kidney tubules get stressed, long before the filtration rate actually drops.
But those haven't fully replaced creatinine yet, right?
No, they haven't.
I'm trying to figure out why, if they are so much faster.
Well, it sparks a rather intense debate regarding utility versus outcomes.
Meaning what?
Let's say we deploy a perfect, real-time biomarker. We detect the cellular stress 48 hours earlier than a creatinine test.
Okay, sounds good so far.
Does it actually change the patient's survival rate if the only thing we can do for them is offer the exact same supportive care?
Oh, wow.
Right? We don't have a magic pill to reverse kidney damage.
Right.
So catching it earlier might just mean we have to watch, wait, and worry for a longer period of time.
Okay, to understand why all we can do is offer supportive care, we have to physically look at the mechanics of the injury itself.
Oh, do.
And to do that, I want to pivot to a really surprising historical event, the Blitz in London, 1941. Because the modern understanding of this disease is completely intertwined with the history of war, isn't it?
It is. The traumatic injuries sustained during those bombings provided a grim but incredibly revealing window into human physiology.
The story of Eric Bywaters during WWII just blew my mind.
It's incredible.
He was a British physician studying people who had been pulled from the rubble of bombed buildings.
Right.
These patients had massive crush injuries to their limbs, but initially they seemed totally fine and stable. They were alive, they were talking, their blood pressure was fine.
Everything looked okay.
Right. But then 3 or 4 days later, they would develop incredibly dark urine, severe swelling, and their kidneys would just fatally shut down out of nowhere.
Yeah. Bywaters was observing what we now classify as rhabdomyolysis-induced AKI.
Rhabdomyolysis.
Right. He realized that the crushed, dying muscle tissue was slowly releasing a massive protein called myoglobin into the bloodstream. And myoglobin's normal job is just to store oxygen inside your muscles.
Mm-hmm.
But when it escapes into the bloodstream and reaches the acidic environment of the kidneys, it behaves very differently.
It effectively becomes a poison, right?
A total poison.
So the rubble crushed the muscle, but the muscle ended up poisoning the kidney.
Exactly. And the mechanics of it are brutal. The myoglobin physically crystallizes inside the microscopic tubes of the kidney. It creates these solid casts that just block the flow of fluid.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the iron inside the myoglobin oxidizes and shreds the delicate cellular lining of those tubes.
Oh, wow.
So it is both a physical obstruction and a chemical burn.
And just figuring that out changed the entire trajectory of trauma medicine.
Completely.
Because by the time of the Korean War, military physicians knew the mechanism. They knew they had to aggressively flush the crush victims with intravenous hydration and use early dialysis.
Right, keep the plumbing moving.
Yeah. By keeping the fluid moving so the myoglobin couldn't crystallize, they dramatically cut the mortality rates from renal shutdown.
They turned a lethal mystery into a mechanical preventable plumbing issue.
Which brings us to the ultimate mental framework. To really grasp how this all fits together, we have to look at the work of a 1940s physiologist named Homer W. Smith.
A legend in the field.
He figured out how to measure the actual filtering capacity of the kidney, and he gave us this core model that makes everything click.
Yeah.
The kidney is a filter. It is fed by an inflow pipe, and it is drained by an outflow pipe.
That is the single most durable mental model you can carry into a hospital.
Really? Just pipes and a filter.
Seriously. If a patient's kidney function suddenly drops, the problem fundamentally has to exist in one of those three places.
Okay.
It is either upstream in the inflow pipe inside the filter itself or downstream in the drain pipe. Identifying which of those three domains is failing is the entire diagnostic game.
Okay, let's start with the inflow pipe. Pre-renal AKI. Pre meaning before the kidney.
Right.
This is apparently the most common cause, making up anywhere from 40 to 70% of all hospital cases.
That's correct.
So in this scenario, the kidney itself is physically untouched and perfectly healthy, but it's just not getting enough blood flow to operate.
The delivery system is failing. The most intuitive cause here is true volume loss.
Like bleeding.
Right. A patient is severely dehydrated from a stomach bug, or they're actively hemorrhaging from trauma. There physically isn't enough fluid in the cardiovascular system to push blood into the kidney.
But there is a huge misconception here that I want to clear up. People assume pre-renal just means dehydrated.
Oh yeah, that's a big trap.
But consider a patient with severe congestive heart failure or severe liver cirrhosis. They can be physically swollen, carrying like 40 pounds of excess fluid in their legs or their abdomen.
Right.
They're the opposite of dehydrated, but their kidneys are still essentially dying of thirst. How does that make sense?
You're highlighting the difference between total body water and effective circulating volume.
Okay, break that down.
The kidney doesn't care how much water is in your legs.
Yeah.
It only cares about the physical pressure of the blood hitting its inflow pipe.
Oh, I see.
If your heart muscle is failing as a pump, it cannot generate enough forward pressure to drive blood into the kidney.
Right.
And if you have advanced liver cirrhosis, your blood vessels dilate abnormally and fluid leaks out of the vessels into the abdominal cavity. The blood essentially hides from the kidneys.
So you're drowning in extra fluid, but the kidney's specific inflow pipe is bone dry.
Exactly. We even have dedicated classifications for this: cardiorenal syndrome and hepatorenal syndrome.
Meaning heart kidney and liver kidney.
Yes. It is a functional, reversible shutdown of the kidney, driven entirely by the failure of the heart or the liver.
And normally the kidney can defend itself against this, right? It has this incredible superpower called autoregulation.
It's brilliant physiology.
The actual filtering unit, the glomerulus, has a muscular valve on its inflow pipe and a muscular valve on its outflow pipe.
The physics of autoregulation are elegant. If your systemic blood pressure drops, the kidney senses the lack of flow. It immediately dilates or opens wide the inflow valve to pull in as much blood as possible. Simultaneously, it pinches the outflow valve shut.
So it traps the blood inside.
It's exactly like putting your thumb over the end of a running garden hose. You restrict the exit, and the pressure inside the hose spikes.
Oh, I've done that a million times.
Right. The kidney uses this trick to keep the pressure inside the filter perfectly steady, even if your overall blood pressure is dangerously low.
But if that pre-renal state drags on too long and that autoregulation fails to keep up, you cross a terrifying threshold. You move from the pipe into the filter itself.
This is our second category, intrinsic renal AKI.
Intrinsic.
Yeah. If you starve the kidney of oxygen-rich blood for too long, the cells that line the microscopic tubules begin to literally suffocate and die.
The tissue itself is damaged.
Yes.
And the most common type of this intrinsic damage is called acute tubular necrosis, or ATN. The tubules die off from a lack of oxygen or from direct toxins like the myoglobin from those bomb victims we talked about.
Right. And the dead cells actually slew off into the microscopic tubes and create clumps, which doctors call muddy brown casts.
Gross.
It effectively clogs the system from the inside out. But this is where we have to address another major clinical misconception.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when you think of a dead kidney filter, you assume the kidneys completely stop making urine.
Naturally.
But that is actually a myth. You can have severe acute tubular necrosis, literally dead, slouging cells inside your kidneys, and still be peeing completely normal or even abnormally high amounts of fluid.
It's true.
If the filter is physically dead, how is water still getting through?
It requires looking closely at what specific part of the tubule is damaged. Let's look at aminoglycoside antibiotics, like the drug gentamicin.
Okay.
They are notorious for causing ATN, but they specifically poison the segment of the tubule responsible for reclaiming and concentrating water.
Oh, so it's a specific part.
Right. The initial blood filter, the glomerulus, might still be pushing fluid through.
Yeah.
But because the concentration pumps are dead, The kidney loses its ability to hold on to water.
So fluid just dumps straight through the damaged plumbing.
Exactly.
The patient's urine output in the hospital bag might look totally fine, giving the doctors a false sense of security, but it's essentially just unconcentrated water. The actual toxic waste is still backing up in their bloodstream.
High-output renal failure is incredibly deceptive. It proves that urine volume does not equal urine quality.
Now, speaking of everyday drugs causing complex damage, I have to point out the wild paradox of NSAIDs, like ibuprofen.
Oh, this is crucial.
We mentioned them in the triple whammy at the start. NSAIDs can cause acute kidney injury in two completely distinct ways. They exist on the pre-renal list and the intrinsic list.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, I'm trying to put this together. How does one standard over-the-counter pill cause two entirely different mechanisms of failure?
It perfectly illustrates why a physician must ask not just what drug a patient took, but by what mechanism that drug interacts with human biology.
Okay.
The primary mechanism of an NSAID is pre-renal.
Right, the autoregulation we talked about, NSAIDs block the production of prostaglandins.
Yes.
And prostaglandins are the chemical messengers your kidney uses to keep that inflow valve dilated.
Right.
So if you take ibuprofen, you rob the kidney of its ability to open the inflow pipe. You cause a purely functional, reversible drop in blood flow.
That is the most common danger. But the second mechanism is intrinsic and far more unpredictable.
Intrinsic meaning tissue damage.
Exactly. In a small subset of the population, NSAIDs act as an allergen.
Wait, really?
Yeah. They trigger a severe inflammatory reaction directly within the kidney tissue itself, a condition known as acute interstitial nephritis.
Oh, wow.
The body's immune system deploys white blood cells that swarm the tissue between the tubules, causing massive structural inflammation and damage.
So the exact same headache pill can functionally pinch your inflow pipe, or it can trigger an allergic swarm of white blood cells that physically destroys the filter.
It's terrifyingly versatile.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered the inflow pipe and the intrinsic filter. What about the drain? Post-renal AKI. I immediately think of this as a clog in the sink.
A clog in the sink captures the basic idea, but we need to look at the physics of the pressure gradient.
Okay, lay it on me.
The kidneys can only filter blood because the hydrostatic pressure inside the blood vessels is higher than the pressure in the urine drainage system.
Fluid naturally moves from high pressure to low pressure.
Exactly.
So if the drain is blocked, the pressure below the filter starts to build up.
Precisely. If a patient has an enlarged prostate that blocks the exit of the bladder, or a massive kidney stone in the ureter, urine cannot escape.
Pull it backs up.
The back pressure builds up all the way into the kidneys.
Yeah.
Once the pressure inside the drainage space equals the pressure inside the blood vessels, the gradient vanishes. Filtration physically grinds to a complete halt, no matter how healthy the kidney tissue is.
It's like trying to push water through a coffee filter when the coffee pot underneath is completely sealed and pressurized.
Great analogy.
The water just stops dripping. But thankfully, this is the least common cause, right? Only about 5 to 10% of hospital cases.
It is relatively rare, though it is disproportionately common in older men due to prostate issues. But from a clinical standpoint, it is incredibly gratifying to discover.
Because it's a purely mechanical fix.
Exactly.
Unlike trying to heal a dying tubule, a blocked pipe is instant gratification. You place a stent or simply unkink a urinary catheter, the fluid drains out, the back pressure instantly drops, and the kidney filtration can normalize in a matter of days.
It is one of the few times in medicine where you can rapidly reverse an organ failure with simple plumbing adjustments.
Okay, so we've laid out the physical rules of the plumbing. Pre-renal, intrinsic, post-renal.
The big three.
But the craziest part of all of this is that some of the biggest, most established rules in this field are currently being entirely rewritten.
They really are.
Specifically, the dogma surrounding contrast dye.
Contrast-induced nephropathy. It is a masterclass in how a confounding variable can trick the entire medical establishment.
For 50 years, if you went in for an angiogram or a CT scan, doctors would inject you with an iodine-based contrast dye to let up your blood vessels.
Right.
And it was taught as a settled, unquestionable fact in medical schools that this dye was highly toxic and caused acute tubular necrosis.
We all believed it.
Hospitals built massive, expensive protocols to prevent it. They would delay life-saving scans or aggressively pump patients full of IV fluids just to flush the dye out.
It was an unquestioned truth. But in the 2010s, researchers began to apply a statistical method called propensity matching.
Okay, let's break down propensity matching. Is that basically like creating a digital twin for a patient in a study? Like if patient A gets the dye, the researchers hunt through thousands of records to find a patient B who is the exact same age, has the exact same heart function, the exact same diabetes severity, but crucially, patient B didn't get the dye.
That is exactly how it works. You eliminate the background noise by comparing nearly identical patients.
Okay.
Historically, studies just compared patients who got contrast dye against the general hospital population. But who gets contrast dye?
Sick people.
Exactly. People having heart attacks, stroke victims, trauma patients, they are inherently sicker. Propensity matching allowed researchers to isolate the dye itself by comparing two equally sick patients.
And the results were earth-shattering. The rates of acute kidney injury between the matched groups were practically identical.
Identical?
The dye wasn't causing the kidney failure at all.
No. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the patients were developing AKI because their hearts were failing, or they were bleeding, or they were in shock. They were developing standard pre-renal AKI from their underlying illnesses. The contrast dye just happened to be at the scene of the crime.
The dye was framed. For 50 years, we blamed the bystander.
We absolutely did.
Now, obviously, doctors are still cautious with the absolute highest risk patients, but it's a striking reminder of how an entire medical practice pattern can outlive the actual evidence behind it.
It forces us to question our core assumptions, which brings up a larger, somewhat philosophical debate currently happening in nephrology circles regarding the nature of AKI itself.
So, what does this all mean? The ultimate question seems to be, is acute kidney injury actually a specific disease? Or is it just the kidney's version of a fever?
That framing perfectly captures the biological reality. When you develop a fever of 102 degrees, it simply means your systemic immune system is unhappy.
Right.
A thermometer doesn't tell you if you have the flu, a bacterial infection, or an autoimmune flare-up.
It just tells you something is wrong.
Exactly. AKI might operate the exact same way. It is a shared final pathway. It is simply the kidney screaming, "I am unhappy," from dozens of completely unrelated insults, whether it's a crushed leg, a failing heart, or a blocked bladder.
Which brings us right back to you, the listener, and that mundane triple whammy we discussed at the very beginning of the deep dive.
The perfect storm.
The hot day, the stomach bug, the ibuprofen, and the blood pressure med. When we map all this physics onto that scenario, you realize that real-world kidney injury is almost never just one neat category.
No, it's a multifactorial stack of insults.
Yeah.
You get dehydrated from the summer heat and the stomach bug. That is a pure volume loss, a pre-renal hit.
Okay.
Then you take your daily blood pressure medication. Many of those medications specifically block the kidney's outflow valve from pinching shut.
So you lose the thumb over the garden hose.
Precisely. You lose the back pressure. Then, to cure your headache, you take the ibuprofen. The NSAID blocks the prostaglandins, which pinches your inflow valve shut. Suddenly, you have completely stripped the kidney of both of its autoregulation superpowers while simultaneously starving it of fluid.
The plumbing just completely collapses.
Collapses.
So, to recap our mission today, we've learned that acute kidney injury is a sudden cliff edge of metabolic failure, not a slow decline.
Right.
We've learned that our main diagnostic test, creatinine, is basically a time machine showing us cellular damage from 2 days ago.
They're diagnosing the past.
We've traced the plumbing from a pre-renal lack of blood to an intrinsic dead filter poisoned by myoglobin to a post-renal clogged drain backed up by pressure.
The big three.
And we've seen that these aren't just isolated categories, they are a timeline. If you don't restore the flow to the inflow pipe, the cells in the filter inevitably suffocate and die.
And this raises an important question, one that the brightest minds in nephrology are still wrestling with today.
Which is?
Well, we talked about those novel real-time biomarkers. The holy grail of detecting kidney injury, the exact second the cellular stress begins.
Right.
But if science does perfect that instant test, will it actually save lives?
Because we don't have a cure.
Exactly. If the only medical tools we possess are the exact same supportive caregiving intravenous fluids, stopping toxic medications, and waiting, will diagnosing the injury faster actually change the patient's survival rate?
Wow.
Or will we just be starting the clock earlier, forced to watch and wait for a storm we still don't know how to stop?
That is a haunting thought to leave on. Thank you for taking this deep dive into the human machine with us. And seriously, the next time it is 90 degrees out and you are feeling a little dehydrated, maybe think twice about how much water you drink before you casually reach for that ibuprofen. Take care of your plumbing.